Excellencies, members of the Working Group of Experts on People of African Descent, distinguished guests, colleagues, good day. Thank you for this opportunity to join you in your discussion around development and people of African descent. I'm particularly happy to join the conversation as we celebrate the declaration of the International Decade for People of African Descent, as well as engage with the post-2015 development agenda. Today, I wish to contribute to the conversation in relation to how issues of gender and understandings of masculinities influence Caribbean development paradigms. In the current turbulence of the world economy, the Caribbean now finds itself at a development crossroads. Despite 50 years of political independence, the region is challenged by high unemployment rates, susceptibility to the impacts of climate change, migration, and its consequent depletion of intellectual and social capital, as well as inadequate and overburdened social protection systems. Our vulnerability to narco trafficking activity and its byproducts of gang warfare, small arms trading, and money laundering all now present themselves as concerns in urgent need of attention, with the potential to reverse many of the socio-economic gains scored in the immediate post-independent era. With the loss of geopolitical significance and the attendant foreign direct investment sub-significance brought, the region is now confronted with the need to develop new means of survival and new paradigms of development. Unfortunately, development paradigms in the Caribbean have always been problematic and incomplete at best. From Lewis's dual sector and industrialization by invitation models in the 1950s, to the dependency theory in the 1960s and 70s, to the various permutations of structural adjustment since the international debt crisis of the 1980s, to the contemporary year-specific national development plans such as Vision 2020 of Trinidad and Tobago and Vision 2030 of Jamaica. Regional development paradigms have all had one consistent and fundamental flaw. They have all insufficiently problematized and sought to offer redress for colonial inheritance of institutional systems and structures which privileged some and disadvantaged others. The conquest and decimation of the First Peoples continued through to the enslavement of Africans, the indentureship of Asians, colonial imperialism, and neo-colonial economic agendas have all conflated to create in our societies systems of discrimination based on the tripartite of race, class, and gender. And while much work has been done on the ways in which race and class have and continue to inform our societies, the interrogation of the impact of gender systems on Caribbean societal structures is still comparatively new. Newer still is the examination of the ways in which concepts and understandings of Caribbean masculinity have shaped our regional social consciousness. In examining Caribbean masculinity and its relation to regional development paradigms, it is critical to note, as Caribbean-based social historian Vereen Shepherd observes, that while it is now generally accepted that there are different and often conflicting images of men and masculinity, certain masculinities are clearly favored. It is an examination of hegemonic masculinity, as embodied in a brand of masculinity that valorizes traits stereotypically associated with being male, such as aggression, dominance, and power, which is critical in setting new and transformative development agendas. Keith Nurse underscores the importance of such an examination, noting that in the Caribbean, as elsewhere, masculinism is a core philosophy embedded in modernism, capitalism, and imperialism. He further calls for an exploration of the relationship between the social construction of masculine identity and the perpetuation of global problematiques. These problematiques in the Caribbean manifest in many ways, including but not limited to: 1. Systems of gender privileging, in which, according to Mark Figueroa, males are assumed to have an a priori right to occupy positions of greater power, social prestige, and access to resources, from which they subsequently develop a sense of entitlement. 2. The subordination of masculinities that exist outside the parameters of hegemonic masculinity, and sanctions, including homophobia and varying degrees of violence, imposed on subordinated masculinities. 3. The relegation of women and girls to the private space, despite international commitments and even in the face of superior educational achievement, with the consequence of underrepresentation of women in every sphere, particularly in elected and appointed political leadership positions. 4. High rates of crime and violence, including gender-based violence and violence against women and children. As Chavans has noted, hegemonic masculinity and patterns of male socialization which privilege males have problematic implications. It must also be noted, according to Barry Chavans, that these implications are problematic not only for women and girls to whom traits of hegemonic masculinity are directed, but to men and to boys themselves. We must come to understand gender systems which are steeped in patriarchal convictions of the superiority of some and inferiority of others, imprison both men and women, all races, all classes, with deleterious consequences for all. If at the core of our development paradigms are on the one hand structures of bias, discrimination, and inequality, and on the other, feelings of privilege and entitlement, no wonder the region now finds itself in its current predicament. As we fully engage in the post-2015 development agenda, commemorate Beijing +20, and celebrate the declaration of the International Decade for People of African Descent, many of whom are resident right here in the small island developing states of the Caribbean, development agendas must be informed by perspectives in which stereotypical constructions of masculinity and femininity are not only obsolete, but are perceived as downright burdensome. Caribbean development paradigms must focus on equity and equality, where issues of gender, masculinity, and femininity ultimately become issues of human rights and human dignity. Thank you.